To me, it just seems to make common sense.
Well, also since it's a service that's being offered and they're paying for it.
Well, that's true. Yes.
And this is a service that was part of the original offering that was made through the original corporation. I understand the corporations are changing, but you know, the new owners cannot change anything until they actually give a written evaluation. Then it's up to the corporation and the private individuals who are part of it.
Because yeah, you know, that's a good observation. Is that, of course, when the new owner took on the ownership of the park, they assumed and acquired all the leases that all of these individuals had with the original owner or the previous owner, and so they assumed that, and of course they assumed the rights and obligations and duties as well. Good observation. Good observation.
Yes, that's what keeps them from having to remarket it at the point they take over, because the fact is most people do not want to have to renegotiate.
Yeah.
So that's otherwise you'd have all these businesses not wanting to buy each other. So this is part of the final deal.
That's right. Well, let's continue on, and we'll show a little bit more of the film footage. Again, this is off of the Rolling Hills website, and of course it is also linked to YouTube as well. So it's all part of the technology of being able to bring information to people from all areas.
Here we go.
Let's take a look.
I would think we wouldn't have to worry about assuming that the original conditions would be met. However, it was only under some kind of, oh my word, attorney coercion that common sense and decency took over. So I don't know how we handle that. It might be appropriate to put those things back in the CUP, and P.S. you might want to send a letter to those dudes saying why we are, because I'm astounded that it took that. And I don't want to be sitting here again in even 2 years, much less my people to follow me in this chair having to go, well, what the world? You know, I mean, really. I played it over so many times when it came to us last time, like, are you serious? You have nothing else to do but take out plumbing because you're going, nah, 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 like 7th grade playground? So
there are some people here, I know they want to speak, but I'm going to limit you. We're only going to allow you to speak about the conditional use permit items, and if there are things that are in here that were taken out that you feel should be put back in, we can't, you know, just randomly expand the conditional use permit. We have to have some basis to do things, and so I'm not interested in hearing about, in general, what's been going on in the park. That's none of the city's business. But if you have some comments on the CUP itself, I'll allow you to make them. Give your name and address for the record, please.
Paul Ruby. I'm president of the Rolling Hills Resident Association. I live at 1334 Pearson Drive in Rolling Hills. We'll abide by what you asked before. I just have one thing I want to ask about. When we were here, we talked about all, A-L-L, all the restrooms. And that means the north and the south shelter, because the north shelter is where they were taken out a couple of years ago. But that's where we have handicapped people over there. And, you know, what do we do about handicapped people? I think they deserve to have toilets also. And everything is there, the plumbing is there. So we're just asking that we have it put in all restrooms. That's all we're really asking for.
Okay. Mr. Canchard will make note of that along with the rest of the staff.
So let's pause here. And again, you know, I find this so fascinating that when you watch the current council now, that they spend half of their time telling citizens what they can and cannot talk about, rather than actually saying, you know what, we're here to listen to you and try to stay on point, but you know, we're here to listen to you.
Well, also, the other thing I'm watching here that surprises the heck out of me is, here's our own mayor saying, let's ignore the Disabilities Act, which is something that has been passed and is in law and is required. So if it's an issue that the old owners probably were aware of, and that's probably why they weren't putting any money in it, but they also was an obligation of the city to come back and say to them that they were actually supposed to put in ramps or a way of getting down to those facilities and the bathrooms and however to get into them, which usually is the loading bars and all, should have all been done at a previous time. But here we've got the mayor saying, hey, we're going to ignore this because no, that isn't part of it. That is part of your state and federal laws that
Right,
you're
right.
supposed to be,
Right.
as a government individual, required to follow.
I think that this thing where he's saying that, you know, we can't just make changes to the CUP. Of course, there's some validity to that. I mean, you couldn't say, well, for the CUP, we want you to have some provision that all the mobile homes, all the manufactured homes are painted white, because what would be the purpose in that? But I think this issue about requiring that there's restrooms, that they are accessible for those that are handicapped, you know what? That's a health, safety, and welfare issue.
Exactly.
And the council certainly has the preview of being able, I think, to be able to make those kinds of conditions. And if you look at other conditional use permits and you look at kinds of provisions that the council has put into a conditional use permit, maybe not this kind of location, but how they've adapted what the needs are of the community and the residents in order to permit the use, you know, the council does have some ability to do that.
And also, you got to realize that this isn't a situation where you're putting great penalties or a great amount of risk on this corporate structure. You're talking about something that you have how many people that are taking use and advantage of, and this is only a temporary use facility. So the cost of that expense is something that should be discussed and looked at, because the fact is that they are making a lot of money off of the total group. And this isn't a very large expense that we're talking about.
Right. Well, and especially since it's already plumbed out. Those restrooms had already been there, and it's just a matter of making them functional once again, because they had actually been removed. So,
Right.
So the plumbing is still all there. So let's continue on. It looks like there's a little bit more here, and of course we want to make sure that we've got the volume up high enough too, so that everyone can hear.
So here we go again.
That falls under the common sense decency clause.
Mayor and Council, for what it's worth, the plans that I saw only talked about facilities in one of those shelters, just for what it's worth.
And for what it's worth back, common sense and decency.
Okay.
The motion that I'd like to make is that that staff bring this back for a revision to the CUP with the intent of reinforcing any of the original conditions of the CUP that might be erroneously thought to have been removed when we revised it. So we're not, the intent here is not to come up with any new conditions. It's just to make clear that those original conditions that the council put in place for the separate two CUPs are still in effect. So from my perspective, this is a clarification, not a revision, because as per Mr. Cantread's conversation with them about the restroom, that was just them misunderstanding the intent, and so we want to have the language clarified, not particularly expanded or altered. Yes, and so the motion is to direct staff to work on that CUP and to call a public hearing for the revised and clarified CUP.
I'll second it. Ms. Juniman?
Well, just for whatever it's worth, that was my understanding, and if that isn't what we intended, I would have to ask for reconsideration and take my vote back, because I'm not voting for something where we're getting into this kind of a muck. How stupid is that? So you might want to pass that on to that dude. I mean, really, we were trying to make sense, and we did not intend to take out anything that was decent in order for them to have the language they wanted. So if that's what they read, they're hard of hearing and a little dull.
representatives aren't here, nor is their attorney. But I would like to say, on at least behalf of my conversations with the attorney for Rolling Hills, he's mentioned that the new owners are very committed to the park. They put in a playground and other things that they haven't been heralded for, if you will. And I really don't think there was any nefarious intent on behalf of the park owners by taking out the facilities. They were non-functioning when they took over, so this was not a game of gotcha.
Okay, so we have a motion by Mr. Nephew, which is seconded by Mr. Copeland. Is there any further discussion necessary? All in favor say aye. Aye. It's ayes all.
So there you go. Now, one thing that I think is very important to mention here is that it appears that in that original conditional use permit, the requirement of having working restrooms in the storm shelters was a requirement. Then somewhere along the way there was a modification to the CUP, and I don't know exactly the year of that, but certainly I don't recall that happening within any recent time here. I think that was, prior to, maybe 5 years ago or something. But the concern that I have here is that Ms. Juniman was saying how, that when that amendment to the CUP was enacted, that it wasn't the intent to have taken out the other items like the restrooms out of the CUP so that that was no longer a condition. However, Ms. Juniman is in her, I think, third term, isn't it, as a council member. And so when she was on the council and the amendment for the CUP came up and it didn't include the restrooms, how come she didn't bring it up at that time and say, I don't see the restrooms listed here? Shouldn't we include those?
I'm a little confused too, because she was talking about all this mess and all this garbage and all that. But
the muck.
The muck, as she said. And the reality is, let's understand, first of all, I would first ask if any of the residents, if they had any of the ads that they had seen when they bought in, they usually give a description of the facility.
Oh, yes.
And it would be actually incongruous at best if the thing didn't meet the actual labeling of what was there.
Oh, so to compare what the description said with what was actually there, yes.
Right. And that's something that really should be the council's issue too, because that is part of the condition of a contract between the public and the owners of the facilities.
Right. And of course the city council doesn't have any say in what kind of contract there might be between the property owner and the people who rent the lots there at the manufactured home park. However, being able to look at that documentation that Mr. Bradley indicated certainly would give the council an idea as to whether or not if that they were given the was given the real scoop on the property owner's mindset or not. So it's more of a thing of kind of giving them insight into whether or not they're being given the an accurate rendition of the facts or the heebie-jeebie answer. Now, one thing now, in switching gears here, because we only have about a half hour left of our TV program here, is that one of the big issues that we have covered here numerous times on the Citizens Reporter is the big push going on currently in the city of Maplewood to have a single hauler trash collector. And Mr. Bradley here, of course, has been on a number of those shows where we've talked about that issue.
Exactly.
Now, I don't know if you had a chance to look at your mail yet today, Mr. Bradley.
Well, I actually got that about 2 days ago from my hauler that said that they want us to be sure to write in that we're very appreciative, and I am appreciative of my hauler, which is Tennis, and they do an excellent job. And it seems like they're looking at trying to get rid of all the haulers but one, to lock us in and make us more responsible to paying one facility fee, as it were.
Right. And so one of